Good evening, Third New Hope family and our streaming guests, and welcome again to Faith and Finance Friday. We're excited that you're joining us this evening. This is our second segment of Faith and Finance Fridays, and we're excited for what God is going to do. So before I get started, again, it's Pastor Thomas, and we have a wonderful guest with us this evening. Some of you all know her. You know her as Minister Alicia Skillman, but I want you to meet Alicia Skillman, the attorney. So I want her to just take a few moments to talk about her business and what she does, and then we'll get more into what we're going to talk about this evening. So, Minister Alicia, tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice and everything.
Thank you, Pastor Lester. I'm Alicia Skillman. In my practice, some people know me as AJ Skillman. I'm a solo practitioner, AJ Skillman Law, PLLC. I practice in the area of estate and probate, copyright and trademark, as well as business development. I was a general practitioner years ago, but decided to narrow my area of focus. I think that way I get to provide a better service to my clientele.
Great, great. So if you haven't, if you don't have an idea of what we're going to talk about on this segment, we're basically going to be talking about estate planning, wills, and trust. Last month, I gave you my email, which is lesteret@gmail.com, and I asked you all to email me and let me know what you thought of the first segment and what you wanted to talk about. And surprisingly, estates and wills and trusts was number one, what you wanted to talk about. So that's where we're at. But let me recap before we start. Remember, I gave you some fine points. I said most things can be done when you want to achieve goals if you are organized, disciplined, willing to make sacrifices, and educate yourself. You should have a strong foundation for almost anything that you want to do in life, and particularly when it comes to some finances. I also challenged us, and I don't know if you all remember, I put a subtle jab in, and I said GoFundMe should not be our life insurance policies. So I want to briefly give us some statistics, Minister Alicia. I've been reading, and since I know I'm doing the moderator or whatever you call it on this, I say let me do my homework, and since we're talking about estate planning, wills, and trust. I read an article this week, and I just want to give you some stats. It basically says 33% of Americans have wills. Only 33%.
Okay.
African Americans, it's lower, 27%. Only 27% of African Americans have wills. It also says that over the next 25 years, $68 billion of wealth will be transferred. That's $68 billion of wealth will be transferred. Then it says that black wealth is less than 15% of white wealth. The median wealth of whites are $188,200. The median black wealth is $24,100. And then lastly, the median black household wealth is expected to hit zero by 2053.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That's a direct correlation to estate planning.
Right. And lastly, before I start giving you some questions, Chadwick Boseman, Prince, and Aretha Franklin were no wills. And we're going to get into that. So, Minister Alicia, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call you Attorney Alicia. Attorney or AJ. AJ Skillman. So I'm going to ask you some questions. Feel free to elaborate. And once I get through the questions, if there's anything else that you think we actually should know, let's talk about it, because we want to basically give everyone that's watching information that they can grow, they can learn, and more importantly, they can share and start a foundation for their families, because it's critical that we as a people understand how we can be diligent in our finances and go up with unrelenting persistence.
Let me say one thing about your statistics.
Okay.
That $68 billion of wealth transfer, that got me excited, because the folks that have that $68 billion are like my parents, those people, your grandparents who worked in the plants and they had those good jobs and they had 401ks and pensions and UAW that helped create their wealth, and they don't consider it as wealth.
Right.
But they own real estate. If you don't set up something for them and end up in court or just end up losing it because you don't do the proper things, that 68 billion wealth transfer will move out of our communities, away from our families, to the government and everybody else.
Yeah, let me add to that since you said it. One of the things I noticed that we're losing already is land.
Oh,
Because you have so many people that had land in the South.
yes.
And they actually don't know the value or the wealth. And so I think it's very critical that we understand before we sell anything, find out the value of what it's worth, and then try and make some decisions and get advice for people from people like you, so that you can advise them of which route to go. So I got a few questions here that I think will help us.
All right.
Because I you know me, I like to learn, so I'm excited for what I'm gonna learn. So the first thing I want to ask you is, what exactly is estate planning?
Estate planning is that process that you use to make decisions about your finances, your assets, even after your death.
Okay.
Okay. It can affect you while you're alive, but it's primarily pointed toward what will happen to your assets after you pass away.
And you said something. What will happen to your assets once you pass away? That's interesting because a lot of times we don't value our assets and think if we don't have a certain amount of assets. But it's critical that whatever we have, we make sure it's designated for who or what we want it to go.
Yes,
Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So think of it like, if your family has a piece of real estate, a house that's paid off, a house that grandpa and grandma paid off, that house can keep you out of poverty.
Yes.
Because if you don't have a mortgage to pay, that house can set you up in ways that you can't imagine. So, don't walk away from it. Find a way to keep it. Even if, you gotta sell it short term on a land contract, but keep it, because that house, it really is valuable. I don't even care if it's only worth $20,000 right now, that house can keep you out of poverty.
Right, because that's one of the things when you, I remember, I believe it was Black Enterprises had a list of top 10 things that generate wealth, and one of them on the list was home ownership.
Yes.
So it's critical. Okay, second thing is, we talked about estate planning, but estate planning incorporates different things. So tell us the difference between wills and trust. What is a will and what is a trust? Do they work together? Tell us like we elementary kids, elementary students.
So a good estate plan will consist of life insurance, a trust, a will, a patient advocate, power of attorney. But the difference between a will and a will is a document, your testament, your testimony of what you want to happen to your assets after you go.
Okay.
And a will, you have to go through the court system. You've got to go through probate, okay? A trust is basically you are setting up another entity. It's like a business that you set up to take care of your finances after you're gone.
Okay.
So one is a piece of paper and one is a business.
Okay.
So that's how I like to think about it.
And I've heard of this terminology. What's a living will?
The terminology will get you messed up. So
Okay.
you can there's
Yeah,
really
explain
no
it to
such
us.
thing as a living
Okay,
will.
all right.
You create your will, you put all your desires in this will. I'm leaving this to this person, I'm leaving that to that person, I want this designated here. They file the will in the court. After the court, when you pass away, someone opens up a probate estate. The judge says, yep, I'm gonna appoint who is supposed to be the personal representative, and that's something else that you designate on the will. and they follow the steps in the will.
Okay.
Period. When those steps are done, you close the estate and it's done. So there's no, living.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a will.
Okay. Can you have a trust without a will?
Oh, absolutely. The two work together when you create your trust, when you create this business, you start putting assets into it. Let's say you have a trust and you decide the trust is going to own your home.
Okay.
Okay, so you deed your home to the trust. But let's say when you pass away, you still have assets that are in your name and not in the trust name. You can have a will, it's a pour over will that designates that everything that you own pours over into the trust.
Okay. Okay. So you mentioned that will, you go probate. So if you just had a trust, and I'm learning. So if you just had a trust,
You avoid probate.
you avoid probate. That's where I was going.
Yes.
Because my next question, since we're here, we're flowing. Well, we're here. What happens when you die without a will?
A lot of things can happen. It could be okay if you have beneficiaries on everything that you have.
Okay.
So you might have a bank account and you have a beneficiary on that bank account. You might have some kind of annuity or whatever. If you have a beneficiary on it, not all those things with beneficiaries skip probate. They go right to the person designated as a beneficiary.
Okay.
But if there's an asset that has no beneficiary on it, then you have to go to probate court and work that out. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
This is some good information. So
The
I'm
real
learning.
estate, the real estate, you can get a ladybird deed. A ladybird deed is a deed that it's a way of transferring your property. You still own it, and it doesn't take effect until you pass away. So
Okay.
you could have your property deeded in a ladybird deed to whoever you want, your kids, but it's still yours. So you can still sell it. You can still get equity out of it. Nothing happens until you're passing.
Okay.
So they get what's left of what you had.
So, if say a piece of real estate is in a trust, the person dies and whoever they will it to, the beneficiary, can it stay in the trust, or how does ownership? I mean,
It can stay in the trust.
It can stay in the trust.
I've been hearing a lot of my colleagues lately say, don't leave your kids anything. And I'm part of that bandwagon now. Don't leave your kids anything. Leave it to a trust.
Okay.
Because if you put it in a trust, it can serve your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, and it can build wealth that you just didn't imagine.
Okay.
It can, if all the assets are in the trust, then they're not paying, your family isn't paying taxes. The trust is paying its taxes. It's all right here. And so it's a less tax burden on your family. When items are in a trust, you could even not make if you want to give someone money out of a trust, give them a distribution. Well, don't just give them the money, give them a loan. Give them a loan to buy their house and make them pay the trust back. And then when they pay the trust back, money is still there for the next generation to buy their property. And get a loan from the trust to buy the next house and the next house.
Wow,
And create
Whew.
wealth.
Man,
Help them buy a business. Go buy a house where they in college, and the trust can loan the money to buy that house, and the roommates can pay for the house, and then when they graduate college, sell the house and put the money back into the trust.
So, in other words, the trust can kind of be like a bank.
Yes.
And you have to have the attitude that because you have stuff in the trust does not mean you're spending it,
Correct.
but you're trying to get it to benefit the family or whoever that it works for
Leave
you.
that principal alone and let it grow and invest it in certain ways and just let it grow. You've heard of banks
Right.
that have that word trust in their name. They started off as a trust.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow. Whew. Okay, so let's keep going. So how often should you update your paperwork? If you got a will, trust, or whatever, how often should you update the paperwork?
So, like, a lot of people may think, oh, that's out of my league. I can't do estate planning. Yes, you can. You can just start, like, if you are a single parent and something happens to you, in a will, you can designate what happens, who's going to take care of your child. Who you have minor children, who do you want to be your child's guardian? That's important to designate in your will. That could be the only reason you have a will right now. But then as you age, you get a little older, you add something, you add your property to your will. You add personal assets to your will. So as you have an experience in life that is significant, that changes, let's say you have another child, then you should look at your documents and see if they're up to date so everybody is covered.
Okay.
You should review your will or your trust and see if everything is covered. So life experiences actually generate when you should look at it. If you remarry, you need to look at it. If you divorce, you need to look at your, because, you know, some people walking around with 3 ex-wives. Well, who's the beneficiary on what account?
Right.
It could,
Okay.
be a fight.
Okay, so not necessarily a time frame. It's really based on life changes.
Yes. Yes.
So I read something. Let's go back to Aretha Franklin. There were some, I don't know if it was discrepancies or something. They said they found something and she had something handwritten. I don't know if it was added to the will or what have you. Can you, if you don't go through like someone like yourself or anything, if you have a will, can you add to it and it be a legal document on your own?
The term is, maybe I think it's called a holographic will, but if it's in your handwriting, and you can create a will.
All right.
Yeah. Just you know, it really matters that you have witnesses. When we make wills, sometimes we videotape it just to make sure, because you want to make sure the person made their own decisions when they get a certain age, and maybe their state of mind is challenged. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If there's a recording of you saying how you want your assets to be divided, that's a big piece of evidence. Yeah, that could be a big piece of evidence.
Okay.
And technology is changing, and so the court process and the legal process is trying to keep up with that. We kind of behind, but it's important for us to try, because you know, pretty soon somebody gonna have a will on a chip somewhere, and we got to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that technology in a few minutes. We're gonna get a little bit more into that. That's the last question I have when we talk about that. But as an attorney, sometimes I know designating people to be the trustee of the trust, or even designating beneficiaries can be kind of hard, because you're trying to say, who am I going to leave these assets to, or who do I trust to make sure everything is done according to the will? What kind of advice would you give to someone that may be struggling with who should be over their assets?
Who should be their
and
personal
who should be
representative?
and who should be the beneficiaries? What kind of advice do you give them?
I've seen families struggle with that, because getting a piece of money that you've never had before can cause weird personalities to come up and cause conflicts in family. It might even be good to get a third party to do it.
Okay.
That's why people might hire me to be their personal representative after their passing. But you need somebody who's fair, who's going to be organized, who's going to consider.
Say that word again. Organized.
Organized.
All right.
Who's going to consider, who's going to follow the will, who's going to consider the decedent's wishes.
Okay.
When there's not a will, that becomes even more important. When you have a will, and you know, you can pick whoever you want to, even if they don't meet those qualifications. But when you don't have a will, and it's Like you want somebody in your family to step up who's going to be fair to everybody. I've seen people just, when there's no will, they file the paperwork to open a probate estate and they take all the money and don't share it with anybody, with anybody else in their family.
Wow.
So if you know that one of your siblings has opened up an estate when one of your parents passes, participate. Don't just be a bystander and expect them to report to you what happens. Because if you just back there in the wings, they could just take the money and go, and there's nothing you can do.
Okay.
Just because they're personal representative doesn't mean they get all the money. They're just the person who's supposed to be the administrator. And I see a lot of people who think that.
Okay. Let's kind of take a little detour, and I've seen there are instances when someone may get sick or need a guardian or something like that. First question: should all that be in the will or estate? Should you talk about that prior to, like, if I got just sick and I needed a guardian, should that be already in my paperwork?
Yes.
And how do you, is it based on what makes you comfortable, who you trust? How do you do that?
Absolutely, through your patient advocate. A patient advocate is basically a medical power of attorney. Should you become unable to make your own decisions, the doctors look at your patient advocate form to see who you designated to make your medical decisions. You can also have in there, if it comes to it that you need a guardian, that you name somebody to be your guardian.
And that, all that is in
It's
the,
part of your estate planning.
It's
And
starting to-
when I do a will, I do a patient advocate form as well as a power of attorney form. So if you become unable to pay your bills, make decisions about, you're just unable to function, there's somebody who's going to continue paying your bills. They take that power of attorney to the bank and say, I'm that person, and they now have the power to handle your business.
okay, so let's clarify, so I'll make sure I get this right. Power of attorney handles your business perspective,
Yes.
bills and different things like that,
Yes.
and your money management.
Yes.
Whereas a patient advocate is strictly for your healthcare decisions, make a
Yes,
decision
correct.
regarding your health. So I hope you all are listening to that,
Correct.
because what happens is you have to pray and believe that who you are designating, whether it is your the trustee, your guardian, your advocate, that they are somebody that is going to fulfill your wishes. And this is critical too. You have to make sure that you have talked to the people
Right.
about what they want. Even though you might have this estate plan, you may have a will and trust, death creates trauma.
Yes, had the conversation.
So you need to know beforehand, before you have to try and look at a document and try and figure out what that person wants. So, am I right about that one?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
have the conversation. We know we're going to die, and there's no reason for us to be afraid of it.
Okay.
Just make your plans. Talk to your family. Tell them what you want them to do, but then put it in writing. Because telling them is one thing, but putting it in writing is something advanced, and you should do it. You should do it.
Excuse me. What I'm learning too is I have, because I have sons that are in college, and I have a son that has him and his wife have their own business. What I'm learning is that a lot of times they're more savvy and more business oriented than we were at their age, and you find out that they have assets.
Yes.
They may have significant assets already, but at their age, they are not thinking about death.
No, they are not.
So you find out that a lot of them do not have an estate plan. How would you help us in saying you need to talk to your children or whatever? How do we convince not just our children as well as people that we know don't have this? How do we convince them to call you and say, look, I need an estate plan. How do I do it?
I talk to the young people these days. They all out there grinding. They all getting their bags. They getting the bags bigger and bigger. Do you want to lose your bag like that? You done worked hard for it.
Right.
You don't want to lose it. You want to leave a legacy, and you create that legacy through estate planning, through the will, through the trust, through real estate, through life insurance, through that medical power of attorney and your power of attorney. You're creating your legacy. Don't do that for nothing. And if you have a business, you need to make sure you have an operating agreement, and in that operating agreement, dissolution, you need a dissolution clause to what happens if your company needs to dissolve because you passed away. Who's going to get that company and its assets if you pass away? What's going to happen to that business if you become ill and no longer able to maintain it? That's the business part of planning for your death. So it's important. You can work for that bag and that money, and don't just drop it.
So,
No.
I'm sorry. I need to back up. I want to do something now because AJ Skillman, she had talked about herself, but I didn't give her a chance to plug her her website, her phone number. How do we reach you? How do we get in contact with you if we are interested in a consultation, or we just want to get the ball rolling? Because I saw you got excited when you talked about that bag and stuff. You stood up for those youngsters, so you must have had some conversations with some that's making some serious serious money. But what's your information so we can contact you?
I'm at 248-508-3235. You can also go to my website, ajskillmanlaw.com.
Excellent.
I'm on Instagram, and I'm also on Facebook. So look me up there.
Excellent. So let's get back. I think I got one more really question that was on my list, and then if you have anything that we may have missed that you want to share, I'll let you have the floor as we close out. Now, I know it should be included in the estate planning, but I don't want to take anything for granted. Nowadays, with technology, login information, password, title deeds, property deed, even funeral instructions. Do you all cover all that in an estate plan?
All that. Have a way that someone has access to your information, so your loved ones or your attorney isn't struggling to figure out all your IDs and passwords, and because these phones, our life is in here.
Right.
If you can open up somebody's phone, you can find out basically everything they need. Pretty soon, the estate plan is going to be right here.
Right.
Some people I know, they have them on the shelf in a book, instructions, but a lot of people, it's right here. So we got to know how to get into it.
Okay.
It's very important.
Excellent. So we have talked about what estate planning is, the difference between wills and trusts, what happens when you die without a will, how often you should update your paperwork. We talked about power of attorney. What was the other one? Patient advocate. We talked about designating your beneficiaries, guardians, information like login, passwords. We have talked about a lot of things. So I'm going to give you the floor to summarize. If we missed anything, or what do you really want to leave us with that you think is very critical when we talk about estate planning?
I think we have, our society wants to make us believe that this is out of reach for us, but it's not. They want to say that only wealthy folks do this, and convince us that we're not part of that group. But a will is affordable. Like, start at a will, and then get life insurance. You have a will and a life insurance, you can create such a nest egg for the next generation. Universal life insurance is life insurance that you can get, that you can borrow from. So instead of borrowing from a bank, borrow off your life insurance. Use your life insurance to have your down payment on your first piece of property. Start as young as possible, but even if you're not as young as you used to be, start now. Get a will, get life insurance, When you get married, review those documents, take the next steps, save your coins, get a trust, and build it and build it. And next thing you know, you have this whole estate plan that's covering you and your family and your grandkids, and you're all set for however long you want it to run.
Awesome, awesome. So
You can afford it. You can afford it. And some of us, you need to not, what am I trying to say? You need to make sure you can. You don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss it.
excellent. You heard it directly from attorney AJ Skillman. It's important that we have estate planning. She is giving you her information. Again, you can reach out to her at
248-508-3235.
and also, if you have any questions for our next segment or what you want to cover in the future, you can reach me at LesterET, that's LESTERET @gmail.com. We are excited for this second segment where we dealt with estate planning. Next month, in March, we're going to have Brother DeJuan Smith, a good friend of mine, and he's going to be talking about retirement planning, annuities, and things like that. So we're excited to have him. We thank you all for joining us. Hopefully in the comments we have some questions that we will review, and we'll try and get back to you, as well as we'll also we're taking inventory on topics that you want to discuss, and we're going to try and make sure every topic that you all want to talk about, we'll cover this year. We're excited. Again, we thank Pastor Quantez Presley, our lead pastor, for this
Amen.
opportunity
Amen.
that we're dealing with the entire person, the mind, the finances, and the family. This piece is the finances. Our theme this year is unrelenting persistence, and we know that we have to be unrelenting and persistent even when it comes to our finances. So until next month, we bless you. We ask that you continue to pray for us, and we will provide you what you need. We're excited for what God is going to do. And we leave you with our theme, It's Up. Make sure whatever you're doing, it's about unrelenting persistence. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bless you, and we will see you next month.
Amen.